So, the big question is this: how are entrepreneurs and real estate investors like us, ones who want to grow our businesses and who are tired of paying for really expensive alternative lending? How do we tap into the most inexpensive money available and do it without the hassle of typical borrowing? That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. I'm Merrill Chandler, and welcome to the Are You Effable podcast. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back. It's the Are You Effable podcast. I am your host, Merrill Chandler. Hopefully, I've been disrupting a whole crap load of your beliefs, both personal credit and personal fundability, as well as business fundability. And we're going to keep that going with this episode when we're going to be talking about what are the several funding strategies. What are the fundable entity types you need to build your funding strategies? So, because without the what we call a QFE, without a qualified funding entity, you haven't got a chance at getting the right kind of approvals you want for your business. So, make sure that you come back. We will get to it. All right, everybody, we're back. Merrill Chandler here. Choosing the most fundable entity strategy for your situation. Remember, we're all different, but all the differences that we have must all come together in trying to create the fundable entity type. So let me tell you a story. When Brad and I are back at FICO World, and we were told, we were talking to the FICO guys, and we're like, hey, do you guys have a list of, what are the entity types that are that are most fundable? And they're like, you need to go talk to Dun & Bradstreet because we're collecting their data, but they're the ones who have that kind of information. So Brad and I go over to the kiosk, Dun & Bradstreet, and I still have the coffee mug, I think it was, that I got from them. And we asked, look, we're just trying to make people, give people a leg up in becoming fundable, making sure they have a chance at funding their businesses. So do you have a list of the most fundable to the least fundable type of business? And they're like, yeah, no, we can't give you that data. We're like, what? Damn it, what? We just want to know, is there something that is, how can we share with people what fundable businesses look like? And they goes, well, what we do have is we have fundable businesses by percentage. Now it's not sorted. Now they give us an Excel spreadsheet so I can do the column sorting. They said we can give you the fundings by percentage. And so two things we go back to. Remember we talked about the SIC code, right? Standard Industrial Classification Code. And the more modern, more recent one is the North American Industrial Classification System, which is NAICS code. Those codes are the ones that are game changers, as we've talked about in previous episodes. You got to have the right funding. If you don't have the right code, they don't need to look at the name of your business alone. If you don't have the right code, they're going to deny your application because you're not a fundable business. And D&B, Dun & Bradstreet, had a list of the percentage of most fundable, or the percentage of fundings by business. So they gave us that, and we're going to go after, as we've already talked, there are several ways to create the qualified funding entity, whether it's a consultancy, whether it's a marketing company, an advisor company. There are a number of ways to create that funding entity. So I refer you back to the previous episode where we talk about the most fundable entities. Now we want the entity type. How do we get to that marketing firm, that consultancy, that advisory company? And this is what we're talking about in this episode. First of all, the features of a qualified funding entity are the following. Number one, we need it at the time of the business line of credit application. It must be at least 24 months old. They prefer 36 months old, but it must be 24 months old. So that means, remember, business failures, until they're approximately 3 to 5 years old, the most number of failures occur in that under 24 to 36 months. So they want you to get past that 24-month to 36-month roll. So it's got to, for at the time of the business line of credit application. And remember, we're going to be talking about some strategies about how to develop these business relationships, but you got to attend. It's got to be 24 months. We prefer in every instance that it be 36 months before you try. Now, it also has to have to be an LLC, okay, or a single shareholder corporation, like an Inc., right, an incorporated company, shareholder. Now, I'm going to disabuse you. I do this in every boot camp, in every situation, every public address. You guys, so many people confuse the difference between a state and a state business entity and a tax designation. So I don't want to hear about S Corps or C Corps, okay? S Corp and C Corp are tax designations. You don't register an S Corp in your state. You register an LLC or an Inc. corporation, a shareholder corporation, or a professional corporation, a PLLC, or a number of other, a sole proprietorship, which we don't do anything, we don't want to do, have anything to do with that. But don't confuse the issues. A S Corp is a tax designation, a federal tax designation. You either have an LLC, most likely an LLC, or a shareholder corporation registered in your state. So, but if you have a shareholder corporation that incorporated, it's got to be single shareholder or you're not going to be fundable. Okay. Now, you can have no funding red flag words in the name of the business or the purpose. And we've already talked about those red flag words. And so that's one of the things that we need to be able to hearken back to, that red flag word sheet. I recommend you go back to that and use and make sure that you're not just the name in your business, but your business purpose does not have any of those red flag words. If you're my client, I'd tell you to run it by your advisor team, because this list is not conclusive, but we've already discussed it. Make sure none of those words are in the name or in the business purpose. Now, for all intents and purposes, whenever you do articles of incorporation or articles of an organization, it's easiest and best is to say in the purpose, any and all legal or any legal business activities. That way you're covered. If you're starting a new entity, as we're going to be discussing here in a moment, then your business purpose could be dedicated to that funding or to that, not a funding entity, but you would use the terms consulting, business consultant, marketing, management firm, etc. Now, you also don't want any prohibitive activities or assets. You can't hold real estate in the qualified funding entity. That's why we call it a qualified funding entity, is it's got certain qualifications that it meets. You can't hold real estate unless it's your personal home or the business building that you can justify as your business building. But you can't have rental properties and apartment complexes and property management. None of those things. Those are all prohibited activities or assets. So you can't have any of those owned. And remember, we an episode or two, we talked about exactly what that means. And then no liabilities. Unless it's positive credit business accounts in the name of the business, we don't want to have any liabilities, and no fundability crushing financial commitments, right? So number 5 and 6 go together. No liabilities and fundability crushing commitments kind of are the same thing in many ways. Those are the features of a qualified funding entity. Now, we have to establish what those strategies are. Now, there are 3 main ones that we're going to be discussing. If you got a $10 million, $20 million, $50 million company, the 4th one I'm going to talk about comes into play for you. And true corporate credit is available to you. But for us small business owners, the first 3 that we're going to talk about is what's going to be necessary. So number 1, the first strategy is to establish a new entity, right? file for a new entity and start aging it. Now, remember, it requires a minimum of 24 months to be old in age before you can go for business lines of credit, right? You can do a little bit sooner. You can try for business loans, but we don't even other than credit cards, we don't recommend any credit instruments until that 24-month age mark. Then this and some of you, if you're working on your personal fundability and you're in the crapper in the 500s, low 600s, mid 600s, you may need to establishing a new entity may be the best thing for you, because you're going to have to age and optimize your personal profile to such a degree that you need all 24 months. And that's not a bad thing. Here's one thing you guys got to know. There is no zip loss of time in this process. If, let's say, you just did a bankruptcy, it's going to take you 3 to 5 years to build your personal fundability back up, okay? That 3 to 5 years, if you do it right and you're building a business relationship according to my structure and guidelines, you're going to be bulletproof and fundable the second your personal profile is online. So there's no time loss, right? So if your personal credit requires 24 months or more, then I always recommend to establish a new entity. Now, the second strategy is to purchase a shelf company. Now, a shelf company allows you to become fundable faster. It's like compressing time. And because you're building or you're buying an aged organization, and they call it a shelf company because you take it off the shelf. It's already been aged. It's like you go back in time, start a company, and then you fast forward, and here you are. It's already 3 years old. If you're going to buy a shelf company, it must be 36 months. Do not play the 24-month game unless you want to spend at least 12 months building that business relationship. That's what I recommend. So, but you can do the same if it's 36 months old. Now, the last one for us, for small business and entrepreneurs, small business, is you modify one of your current entities. And this goes through a significant qualification process. But if you modify a current entity, then you go back to this list and make sure that it fits every single, the list we talked about, 24 months old at the time of a business line of credit application, LLC, no red flag words. You have to change the name, et cetera, et cetera. Those three: establish a new, what I call a new co, establish a new company, new co, a shelf company, or modify a company, the entity. And I have three Utah companies that are just aging right now. Now, I don't use them for funding, but with the stroke of a pen, we can enter into the Secretary of State database. You can change the name, but you keep the aging of the company. So there are important things you have to do to make this happen. Again, this is adult supervision is required, but you got to modify a current entity so that it becomes fundable. All right. Now, for those of you who have larger organizations, then other strategies exist depending on the size and scope of your funding objectives. You can do a reverse merger into a public company. You can do an acquisition or lateral merger. You can establish corporate credit ratings like Standard & Poor's, et cetera. Those are all literally $10 million plus or higher. And I love those are the fun projects, right? But you have to determine the strategy you're going to seek your funding. Now, I'm going to go through a couple of examples that outline each one of these, all right? And each one of these are designed to make sure that I share an experience with one of our clients or one of our students who has gone through this process. So let me tell you about Stephen. Stephen was actually doing the work for his wife, and his wife had reasonably fundable personal profiles, but they didn't have what it takes to have a fundable entity that they could then build a relationship. Remember, the relationships with the banks is most critical. Once you've got your personal profile in play, Everything else comes in after that. And then it backstops your business and the data points that are searched, as we've discussed in previous episodes. So my team shared the features and benefits of all of those entity strategies, right? 1, 2, 3, NewCo, ShelfCo, and ModCo. Then they decided to clone a qualified funding entity model and made their shelf company a fundable company. So they decided that they wanted to do a shelf company, but they had to match every details, change the names, make it a fundable name, make it the SIC codes, the NAISC codes, modify all the business credit reports, et cetera, et cetera. Now, we provided comprehensive fundability plans, step by step, the what we call traffic cascades, everything necessary to create the relationship with the lenders, and made aged them and created the online presence and the real world presence. Everything in that, so that lenders would look at them, all business funding, FICO's metrics would be hit, the automatic underwriting system metrics would be hit, etc. We kept them on track for a 24-month period. We created the 24-month plan of which they were going to be fundable about month 13 to 15. Many of our clients end up being have all the crossover point between personal and business at 12 to 18 months, right? We've had many people funded sooner, but they also had special circumstances where those cases came into play. They were already on third base with their personal fundability before we could, and then we started the business side. So in everything, these guys, after we were done, after they cloned that entity, they picked up $110,000 between 3 banks in their first funding, right? So it works. You have to create a personal fundable funding entity. You have to create personal fundability first. Then you have to create the funding entity. Derek and Aisha, they were an awesome couple. This was an amazing, I mean, this was a feat, a first for my team and even for myself. He lived in one state, she lived in a second state, and their business was in a third. And so there were a lot of considerations that need to be handled. So the reason why I bring up Derek and Aisha is because you need to understand that there is a solution to every single funding situation out there. All of them. On theirs, they also did a shelf co, but not only did they do a shelf co, but they also set up, they wanted more loans than lines of credit. And so they were especially interested in what are called property acquisition loans. So after their team built their funding entity with them, after they created, because they were a partnership, and by the way, we call partners relationships that are either include bed, blood, or business. That's what we call partnerships. So these guys created keyed all of the right personal underwriting triggers so that their personal fundability for both of them, and they implemented what we call a sunset clause so that each one of them could in turn acquire new lines on their credit profile. They backstopped their own set of business loans and business lines of credit and took turns backstopping those loans and built the collective amount to the tune of $580,000 in a single unsecured property acquisition business credit line, plus $90,000 in other business lines, credit lines, and credit cards. That's over $670,000 in their first round. And they also passed, I believe it was like 12 months in optimizing all of their situations so that they could fundable. It's all about building your personal credit profile while building the relationships with the lenders that you want to establish amazing relationships with that are going to continue and continue and continue. You with me? All of this is vital. So let me finish with Teresa. Teresa, some of you may have seen this in other presentations. We definitely have it in our boot camp. We have her giving us a testimony in her own words. We vetted her current entity, and the details are amazing. We vetted her current entity and substantiated and fixed all of the things that were out of alignment with the funding qualifications. That's like when we say cloning a funding entity, we're literally taking this funding entity and making your funding entity a current entity that that qualified, right? Then our team reviewed her business credit reports to ensure there were no deal killers, that no funding time bombs, all the NAICS codes, the SIC codes, the address, everything that we've talked about over the last half dozen episodes were in play, right? We vetted current banking relationships. We found some red flags, right? We had to go clean up a number and help her understand the importance of all the details. Do you realize, not in her case, but we've had clients who've got kicked out into manual underwriting because there was a difference between a hashtag or an apartment or using the term suite, apartment, or hashtag. People have been denied their credit profiles or kicked into manual underwriting by the use of which one of those of what are called delimiters, the hashtag, number 121, or a apartment 121, or suite 121. It's data has to be synced, guys. So we found some of the red flags in her situation and showed her and helped her clean those up. Her PCID was not pretty, just like most of you. If you've pulled your MyFICO credit reports, it's not pretty, guys. myfico.com, pull that credit report, get that advanced, and start using that to optimize your profile, or bring it to the boot camp. Make sure you go to Get Fundable at getfundable.com. getfundable.com. Make sure you go to the boot camp and find out and do all of this in one fell swoop. Finally, after she was about 14 months, Teresa was, in optimizing her profile. And here's what's amazing. She goes in there prepared to do full doc. She is asked for her tax returns and her financials. They pulled her credit, reviewed her flawlessly implemented application, as you've already learned. Her PCID and BCID were perfect. Filled out this application. They pulled her profile. We had spent 14 months optimizing the fundability of her profile. And they said, okay, we're ready to come out. We'd like to come to your place of business and have you sign. And she's like, well, hold on. I haven't even gotten you the tax returns and the financials. And she said, yeah, or they said, your credit is fine. In fact, it's unusually fine. And I'll let you, if you attend the boot camp, it's worth the wait. I'm just telling you the truth of the matter. And I tell you, she got a $500,000 business line of credit, first banking relationship. She has numerous now, first banking relationship, and it was stated income, no docs, even though she was prepared to deliver them. Guys, this is a thing. It's a thing. Everything we've been talking about, everything you're binging, I don't care if it makes sense, and I don't care if it feels good. I don't care if you sense that there's conspiracy theories going on out there. What I care about is that you have a personal fundable profile and a fundable business profile. That's what I care about. A qualified personal profile and a qualified funding entity. That's what I care about. If you are not able to do those things, if this is all just mental masturbation where you're just getting some good ideas, but you're not implementing it, go to getfundable.com and check out the boot camp. Make it actionable. Guys, it's $97. At least at the time of this, I better get it while the getting's good, because at the time of this podcast is recorded, it was $97 to attend. It's nothing. You have got to go to the boot camp and find out and get the actionable intel, go through the workbooks, go through the worksheets, and then get your strategy sessions so you can do something about this. Guys, I love everything about Fundability, personal and business. I love that you guys are committed. Some of you are just, our numbers are going through the roof when it comes to the number of downloads and plays, unique plays that are happening out there. So thank you. Thank you. Leave us, if you haven't already, leave us just like I say in the outro, leave us a comment. Tell us how we're impacting, or how this information is impacting your life. And let's do this together. Have a spectacular day. I'm going to leave you here because we got so much more to cover. Peace. Hey guys, thank you for listening to Are You Effable? Please leave comments, because I would love to read about your aha moments from this episode. And be sure to visit fundinghackers.com to view the blog post, get important links, join our community, and much, much more. And you gotta tell your friends about this podcast. We want them to become effable too.